They didn't put a gun to her head. They didn't burn a cross on the lawn. They didn't shout slurs or spray paint walls. No, what they did was worse. They watched. They recorded. They fined her for flowers planted 2 inches too far from regulation. They wrote her parents up for the color of their front gate, and they did it all with smiles, polite voices, and policy binders. Until one night, they pointed a gun at her. Wrong house, wrong daughter. She was special forces, and fully armed. But what they didn't know, what they still don't, is that Naomi Trenton didn't come back from war to pick a fight. She came home to finish one. The knock didn't come like a neighbor's tap. It came like a demand, like a warning with a badge. 3 heavy thuds struck the Trenton family's front door just after 9 p.m. Measured, mechanical, like the hand behind them had done this many times before. Evelyn Trenton, standing in the kitchen with her teacup still warm between her palms, stiffened as though the glass beneath her feet had cracked. Richard looked up from his recliner, his muscles slower than his instincts, but they were still there, coiled from years of learning when to stay silent and when to brace. "Open the door! Now!" This time it wasn't a knock. It was a command. From the edge of the curtain, Richard saw them. 2 men in uniform, one calm and still. The other already had his weapon drawn, angled low but unmistakably ready. And then the light hit. A harsh, sweeping beam that split the porch like a floodlight on a stage, casting shadows into corners that never asked to be seen. Evelyn gasped, not because she was surprised, but because she wasn't, and that hurt more. Across the street, the black SUV stopped with a slight screech, tires gripping pavement just a second too long. The neighbors might not have recognized the vehicle, but the woman stepping out of it knew this street better than any map. Naomi Trenton was home, uninvited, unannounced, and just in time. She hadn't planned to make an entrance. She thought she'd park, knock softly, and surprise her mother with the chamomile tea she used to sip as a child. Instead, she stepped out of the vehicle with the silence of a threat, boots clicking against the concrete like war drums that only she could hear. The porch was bathed in light, and she stepped right into it. "Stop right there," one officer shouted, gun raised, flashlight trained on her chest. She didn't blink. "I said stop. I heard you." Her voice didn't tremble. It didn't rise. It fell like steel into water. "I live here." "You live here?" the second officer repeated, squinting at her like he was trying to see past her existence. "I was born in that back bedroom," she said, nodding toward the hallway window. 15 feet behind you." The flashlight didn't move. Neither did the gun. Naomi raised her hands slowly, fingers splayed, not in fear, but to calculate. She took in everything, the angle of the weapon, the hesitation in his wrist, the tremor in his breathing. He was trained enough to pull the trigger, but not enough to understand what she'd do if he did. He wasn't military. That much was clear. His feet were planted too wide. His posture screamed fear wrapped in performance, and that made him unstable and dangerous. "I just got off active duty," she added, voice flat. "Special forces. My credentials are inside, on the counter, next to the tea kettle." They still didn't lower the gun. From behind the screen door, a familiar voice cracked. "That's my daughter." Evelyn's voice wasn't loud, but it was final. A pause just long enough to make Naomi's jaw tighten. Then the flashlight dipped. The gun followed reluctantly, as if doing so cost the man something personal. No apology followed, no explanation, no record of entry, no further questions, just silence and retreat. Naomi saw the name tag, Sanford, Greg Sanford, the name her father had whispered on the phone. Part-time cop, full-time tyrant with a clipboard and a badge. The patrol car backed out slowly, headlights casting wide arcs over the pristine lawn, the freshly edged sidewalk, the HOA-mandated shrubs. Everything here was tidy, predictable, controlled. Except this moment. Naomi didn't move. Not yet. Her hands lowered inch by inch, but her mind didn't. Her mother still stood on the porch, lips pressed into a thin line. Her father hadn't spoken, but Naomi was already listening to everything they hadn't said. Across the street, a curtain twitched. A light snapped off. She watched the way this neighborhood breathed, not with kindness, but with calculation. It monitored. It measured. And now it had measured her. They didn't care who she was. They didn't care what she had survived, what she had earned, what she had given. They only saw a threat wrapped in brown skin and black boots. And when they pointed a gun, they expected silence. But they didn't know what they touched. They didn't know that Naomi Trenton had survived battles where justice was a myth and death was mathematical. They didn't know that what scared her wasn't bullets, but the slow, quiet corrosion of dignity. She turned back toward the house, her expression unreadable. They had made their first move, and now they would learn what it meant to aim at the wrong daughter. The call came at 6:14 p.m. Naomi was still in uniform, boots kicked off under the desk, a stack of unread reports glowing faintly on her monitor. The base was quiet, distant echoes of military rhythm humming through the walls. Outside, the Nevada sun was doing what it did best, dying slowly over empty land. Her phone buzzed once, then again, "Dad." She stared at it for a second too long. When she answered, his voice didn't sound like her father's. It sounded like a man borrowing the voice of someone she used to know. Naomi, just her name. That's all it took to pull her spine straight. "Is everything okay?" she asked, already knowing the answer. There was a long pause. She heard the rustling of paper, then a sigh. "I got another notice today," he said. "Apparently the mailbox is now 2 inches too far from the curb. That's the 5th this month." Naomi closed her eyes. Same person? Same name on the letterhead. Denise Langford. Same bold red stamps. Same tone like we're lucky they haven't towed the house away. She let the silence stretch. "Mom found it first," he added quietly. She didn't say much, just folded it and put it next to the coffee pot. But I could see it in her shoulders. "What did it say this time?" Naomi asked. "That we're out of compliance. Again, grass height, mailbox placement, garden hose angle. Doesn't matter. We're always out of something." He laughed, but it wasn't real. It was the kind of laugh used to cover up a wince. "There was a note taped to the garage this morning," he continued, his voice lowering. "Written by hand, block letters, no name, just know your place or leave." Naomi sat up. "Did you report it? To who? HOA? Sanford? They're the ones probably watching us install the damn mailbox with binoculars." She rubbed her forehead. "You should have called me sooner. I didn't want to bother you. You're doing more important things. You're out there, fighting for something." "I'm not sure that's true anymore." He didn't respond. Silence returned, thick and unfinished. Then almost like a confession. "Your mother's afraid to plant her lavender this spring. Says it'll probably be the wrong color." Naomi's throat tightened. "She loves that lavender." "I know." A beat. "Naomi," he said slowly, voice faltering for the first time. "I've tried to be patient. I've tried being agreeable, quiet, reasonable. You know that. But it doesn't matter what we do. The way they look at us, the way they talk to us with smiles that don't touch their eyes. It's like the air itself has turned against us." He paused. "I thought if we were kind, they'd return it. That's what I taught you, didn't I?" "You did." Another silence, softer this time. "I was wrong," he said. "We need you." The line went still, except for the faint hum of cicadas and wind. Naomi didn't speak. Her hand rested on the edge of the desk, fingers curling into her palm. "I'll come," she said at last. "I'll leave tonight." "You don't have to." "I do." By 7:03 p.m., Naomi had submitted her emergency leave request. No explanation, no elaboration, just a straight-line sentence and a date. Immediate family threat. Horizon Ridge. She packed light. No fatigues, no insignia. Only what she needed. Paperwork, boots, and a jacket she hadn't worn since Kabul. It still carried the smell of grit and gun oil. At 7:41, she pulled out of the base. The sun was half dead on the horizon, streaking the sky with blood and gold. She didn't listen to music. The road hummed beneath her tires like a low, steady growl. Her mind replayed the last word her father said before hanging up. Need. It wasn't a command, it was a fracture, a surrender. He had never asked her for anything. Not once. Not when she joined. Not when she deployed. Not even when she didn't call for months. But now the strongest man she knew sounded like a man standing outside his own house, holding a legal notice, wondering if the color of his lawn would be the thing that finally broke him. She had faced bullets. She had flown helicopters through fire. She had pulled injured men from roadside wreckage while mortars still rained. But this was something else. There was no battlefield here, no enemy lines to cross, only fences. clipboards, violation reports, and a war of slow suffocation. Naomi tightened her grip on the wheel. She was going home, and this time, she wasn't just her parents' daughter. She was their line in the sand. The sun wasn't fully up when Naomi turned into the neighborhood. She had driven through the night with no music, no stops, just silence and asphalt. The rhythm of war zones still buried somewhere in her bones. But Horizon Ridge, it had its own rhythm, one of control disguised as order, one of smiles polished thin as glass. The entrance gate swung open without a sound. She was already inside. The streets looked manicured to perfection, not just clean, but curated. Hedges trimmed to uniform height. Flags displayed every 3 homes, all in regulation holders. Even the mailboxes gleamed, as if waxed for inspection. It looked peaceful. That's what made it dangerous. Naomi drove slowly down Primrose Way, the street where she learned to ride a bike, where her father taught her to throw a perfect spiral. But now garages clicked shut the moment she passed. Curtains twitched. A sprinkler shut off mid-cycle as if embarrassed to be caught running. It wasn't paranoia, it was a ritual. This neighborhood didn't threaten you, it dismissed you. Richard and Evelyn were waiting at the porch. Her father stood with his arms crossed, tight against his chest. Not defensive, just exhausted. Evelyn held a small garden towel in both hands, wringing it as if she were trying to dry something that would never be dry again. Naomi stepped out of the car, stretched her spine. She walked up the path she once ran down every summer barefoot and hugged her mother first. "You didn't need to come so fast," Evelyn murmured, holding on. "Yes, I did," Naomi said. Her father embraced her next, strong but brief. "I wish I had something better to offer than this." "You do," she replied. "You called me." Inside, the house still smelled like lemon polish and old Sunday paper. Nothing had changed, but everything felt strained, like the walls had learned to brace. Naomi noticed the letters immediately. A stack on the sideboard, each envelope larger and redder than the last. She lifted the top one. Violation, inconsistent mulch coverage in front planter. Another, repainting required. Mailbox shows visual fade under sunlight. Another, unapproved decorative item. Wind chime may exceed HOA sound policy. "Sound policy?" she asked aloud. Richard sat down heavily. "They said it makes the yard feel cluttered." Naomi stared at him. "It's 3 notes, wooden. Soft enough that even the wind seems unsure whether to touch it." They took a sound measurement. He gestured toward the corner. They used a decibel meter. Naomi set the envelope down, slow and deliberate. "And we're still calling this a neighborhood?" She walked to the window. From here, she saw it clearly. Across the street, house number 42 had a small device perched beneath the gutter. Too neat to be random, too angled to be unintentional. A security camera, not facing its own door, pointed directly at the Trentons' porch. "Has that always been there?" Her mother joined her. "It showed up a month ago, then another. House number 38 has one too. All pointed at us." Naomi's jaw clenched. "And that van?" she asked, pointing toward a plain white vehicle parked at the corner. Richard nodded. "Rotates drivers. Shows up late morning. Leaves before dinner. We call it the ghost." "They're documenting," Naomi said. "Every move, every deviation." Her voice dropped. "They're not just watching. They're building a case." Later that afternoon, Naomi walked the length of the street. No uniform, no name tag. Just her, Naomi Trenton, in black and silence, her eyes doing what her words would not. Doors didn't open, but blinds parted, heads turned. She passed the Singh household. Mrs. Singh was watering her orchids, lips pressed into a line. Their eyes met. Naomi nodded. The woman paused, then nodded back, barely. A boy across the street stood on a stepladder, adjusting a flag that already hung perfectly straight. His father watched him from the doorway, arms folded. Naomi continued. She paused by a mailbox with a fine crack across its surface. Another with a dent, another with a small white sticker, half peeled. Minor details, but to Naomi they were like bruises, proof of pressure applied over time. When she returned home, Evelyn was clipping dead petals from her lavender. Richard was at the kitchen table, flipping through a folded community bulletin. Cover photo, Denise Langford, smiling, arms crossed, in front of the HOA headquarters. Headline, Compliance Builds Community, a Vision for Spring. Naomi read it, then placed it next to the stack of violations. "They want you tired," she said. "Not just angry, tired enough to leave." Richard didn't look up. "That's what happened to the Jeffersons and the Nuyens. Quiet one day, gone the next." Evelyn added, No goodbye, just a for sale sign and silence. Naomi crossed her arms, voice low. But not us. And for the first time, neither of her parents corrected her. The first confrontation didn't come with shouting or broken glass. It came with a clipboard, a smile too smooth, and silence wrapped in regulation. Naomi had just stepped out to check the mailbox. The lavender hadn't bloomed yet, but she could feel the morning heat tugging at the soil. She bent down to reposition the hose, a half loop off its bracket. When she stood, Denise Langford was already there. Walking with posture honed by years of being obeyed, she moved as if the sidewalk belonged to her spine. Her heels clicked softly, hands folded neatly over the clipboard like it was scripture. Naomi didn't flinch. She watched her approach with the calm of someone trained to measure threats by breath, not volume. "Good morning," Denise chirped. Her tone had the kind of cheerfulness that felt like it had been practiced in a mirror. "I thought I'd stop by and say hello. We try to maintain a neighborly atmosphere here in Horizon Ridge." Naomi said nothing at first. Let silence fill the space. Then, "You've already said plenty." Denise tilted her head, smile tightening. "Excuse me. I've read your notes," Naomi said. "Mailbox paint, wind chimes, hose angle. You're thorough." Denise gave a soft laugh. "Oh, I don't personally write them. That's the board's administrative system. I simply ensure standards are enforced," Naomi finished. "You enforce them." Denise hesitated. "Well, we ensure fairness." "To whom?" Naomi asked. Denise's expression shifted. A microsecond glitch like her programming skipped. Then she smoothed it over. "To everyone, of course." Naomi let the sentence hang, just long enough for it to rot. "Your mother's lavender is growing in beautifully," Denise said quickly, eyes drifting to the edge of the porch. "I do hope it's on the approved planting list. HOA prefers region-specific flora." Naomi stepped down from the porch. Her feet landed soft, but her presence didn't. "My mother plants what grows where her ancestors are buried," she said. "That's her list." Denise stiffened. "We're all just trying to keep the neighborhood harmonious," she offered. "Visual unity promotes collective comfort." Naomi's voice dropped a note. "Whose comfort?" A beat of silence, then another. Denise shuffled a page on her clipboard. "There were some concerns about unfamiliar vehicles parked overnight. I'm sure your car is just temporary?" "It's mine." Denise raised an eyebrow. Naomi took a step closer. "And it's not going anywhere." A flicker of something passed across Denise's eyes. Worry, calculation, maybe even fear. But her voice remained composed. "Well, as long as everyone cooperates, I'm sure we'll have no further issues." Naomi's gaze didn't shift. "That's the thing. I didn't come back to cooperate. I came back to protect what should never have needed defending." Denise faltered. Behind Naomi, Evelyn had stepped onto the porch, arms crossed, jaw tight. Denise smiled again, thinner this time. "Have a pleasant day." Naomi held her stare until Denise turned. Quick steps, retreat disguised as poise. But Horizon Ridge didn't send just one message. It sent backup. At 6:42 p.m., a gray truck marked HOA Security Enforcement rolled into view and parked directly across the Trenton driveway. Engine idling, lights off. Naomi watched from the window. She didn't need to ask who it was. Greg Sanford. He stepped out like he was still on patrol in Iraq. Chest out, belt heavy with bluff authority, boots too clean to have ever seen real dirt. He walked past the mailbox, didn't look at it, turned toward the bushes, stared at them like they'd committed treason, pulled a phone from his belt and took a picture of the garden hose. Naomi stepped outside. Greg turned. "Evening," he said, tone casual but laced with condescension. "You know your hose is still out past dusk?" Naomi folded her arms. "I didn't realize dusk came with a curfew." Greg smiled, slow and toothless. "Just keeping the neighborhood safe." "From what, hydration?" He let out a chuckle. "Feisty. You always like this?" "Only when armed," she replied smoothly. He paused. "You threatening me?" "No," Naomi said. "I'm telling you, I see exactly what you're doing. The photographs, the drive-bys, the notes. This isn't enforcement. It's siege." Greg stepped forward. "You're new here, so I'll let that slide." "I'm not new," she interrupted. "I was born here. I bled on that curb. I buried a dog in that yard. You're the outsider. You just wear a badge and think it gives you roots." His face darkened. "You people always think someone's out to get you." Naomi's body stiffened. "You people," she repeated slowly. Greg held the silence a beat too long. "I'll be filing a harassment report," he said finally. "You do that," Naomi replied. "Just make sure you spell my name right. Because when this goes to court, I want them to know exactly who called you out. Greg stared, breathing tight. You should leave this alone. Naomi took one step forward, close enough he could smell the steel resolve in her breath. Wrong family, she said. Wrong woman. Wrong war. Greg backed away but didn't turn his back. He got in his truck, slammed the door, and drove off without his usual slow patrol. Inside the house, Evelyn stood at the sink, silent. Richard watched from the hallway, his arms at his sides. No one said anything. They didn't need to. The battle had just begun. But for the first time, the house didn't feel afraid. It felt awake. It started with a blink that wasn't supposed to happen. Naomi was up late again, restlessly organizing violation letters, mapping timestamps on a legal pad, trying to find patterns in the petty cruelty. It was past midnight when she stood at the kitchen sink, sipping water, staring blankly through the window. And then, there it was, a small red light, steady and deliberate, blinking from under the eaves of house number 42. It wasn't new, but the timing was. There had been no movement outside, no motion to detect, no reason for any sensor to trigger. Yet it blinked, not in reaction, in anticipation. Naomi's spine straightened. She turned off the kitchen light and crouched beside the window, pulled out her phone, zoomed in. The camera lens stared back, not wide angle, not residential grade. Pan tilt zoom, a tool designed to follow. She widened her sweep of the neighborhood. She saw them then, subtle glints on otherwise ordinary homes. A lens tucked inside a faux bird feeder, another hidden in a driveway light, one perched at the peak of a decorative gable. Different designs, same target. All pointed toward her parents' house. She checked timestamps, footage. The pattern was sickening. Movement at her driveway, blink. Her mother picking lavender, blink. Her father pulling trash bins in pajama pants, blink. Naomi's hands curled around the window frame. This wasn't security. It was a perimeter. She was living inside someone else's hunt. The next morning she walked. No uniform, no clipboard, just stillness. She walked the full loop of the neighborhood. Didn't wave, didn't speak. Every few homes, a curtain shifted. A child's bike stood still in a yard with no laughter. A sprinkler turned off mid-cycle as she passed. None of it was random. She stopped outside house number 42, folded arms, waited. It took 40 seconds. The door cracked open. Leon Parker stepped out. Gray beard, tired eyes, ball cap, older than most of the families on the block. You see it now, he said. Naomi didn't blink. You have something for me? She asked. He gave a sad, almost ashamed nod. Come in. Leon's home smelled like dust and ink. A pot of coffee had long gone cold. The dining room table had become a war desk. Papers stacked, wires tangled, folders arranged by color. No screens, just truth. I've been collecting, he said, for 3 years. Naomi stepped closer. He pointed to a binder labeled optics. These are not HOA-issued cameras. These are police surplus models, sometimes municipal budget leftovers. Somebody used city grants to install private surveillance. Who? She asked. Sanford, Langford. They wrote the proposals, said it was to deed or porch theft, but only 5 homes got cameras. Naomi flipped through photographs. All 5 homes belonged to families of color. Not a single one to the donors who had championed the program. There's more, he added, his voice lower now. He slid forward a thin manila folder. Inside were emails, memos, even printed HOA meeting notes with red pen underlines. Compliance strategy, he explained. Naomi read in silence. Too many violations and they'll consider relocating. Subtle is safer. No direct conflict. Focus on mailbox, hose, garden colors, concrete things. Easy to prove. Hard to appeal. Residents who complain loudly should be monitored. Track behavioral patterns. Hostility usually shows early. Let them feel seen, constantly. It's more effective than confrontation. They wrote this down, she asked. They believe they're untouchable, Leon said. He tapped the table. Then he opened a laptop and played a clip. The screen showed her mother, Evelyn, watering the lavender, humming softly. 10 seconds later, an HOA patrol car drove by. The camera feed switched, now from another angle, recording her from across the street. Same time, same woman, 2 angles. You don't build this much surveillance for plants, Naomi whispered. Leon offered her a flash drive. What's on it, she asked. All of it, he said. Videos, documents, voting records, audio from a board meeting where Sanford joked that mailbox violations were the HOA's new quiet eviction policy. Naomi stared at the drive. I've given this to reporters before, Leon added. No one followed up. Legal lines are blurry, and they're powerful. So why me? He met her eyes. Because you're not afraid of blurry lines. She held the drive in her palm. Heavy, not in weight, in consequence. That night, Naomi didn't sleep. She copied files, highlighted excerpts, printed entire transcripts. She sorted everything into folders, SHOA violations, surveillance patterns, internal strategies. Testimony log, Parker, Leon. By 2:37 a.m., she stood at the window again. The blinking red light was still there. But now it didn't unnerve her. It motivated her. Let them record. Let them document. Let them stack violation notices to the ceiling. Because starting tomorrow, every page they filed, every angle they captured, would be ammunition. For her, no flyers, no shouting, no calls for justice on social media. Just 5 notes. Each handwritten, folded once, taped shut, and placed silently into 5 mailboxes after dusk. No envelope, no return address, just a sentence on the outside in Naomi's sharp, no-nonsense handwriting. After 9 p.m., front porch light will be on. Come in through the side gate. No questions, just truth. She waited. At 9:04, Liam Parker arrived. He didn't knock, just nodded and stepped inside with a manila folder tucked under his arm and silence trailing behind his boots. By 9:12, the Singhs came, Amrita and Raj, holding hands tighter than usual. Neither said a word at first. Their teenage son followed reluctantly, glancing over his shoulder twice before slipping through the gate. At 9:26, Ellen Moreno stepped in. Her eyes darted everywhere. Her breath came shallow like she'd been holding it for years. Then Jason Adler, the last to arrive as expected. Carrying nothing but a clipboard with his own printed HOA bylaws, his name still faintly circled in red pen, remnant from when his candidacy had been denied. They didn't sit. They didn't speak. For almost a full minute, the only sound in Naomi's living room was the slow tick of a wall clock and the occasional creak of shifting weight. Then Naomi walked in from the back room, carrying a small black case. She placed it on the table, unzipped it. Inside, a flash drive, printed transcripts, still frames of surveillance angles, highlighted quotes, satellite photos with red ink circles. A list of names. This is everything they built to watch us, Naomi said calmly, and everything we'll use to take it down. She didn't give a speech. She gave evidence. A paused frame of Mrs. Singh watering plants at 6:04 a.m., time-stamped just minutes before a violation notice appeared in her mailbox. A memo outlining surveillance prioritization criteria. Language coded just enough to avoid legal scrutiny, but sharp enough to slice. Audio, fuzzy but clear, of Greg Sanford joking that mailbox paint is a more efficient eviction notice than a court order. Jason let out a slow breath. His hands trembled as he wrote something on the clipboard. Ellen blinked fast, jaw clenched. So it was never just me. Leon looked at her, then to Naomi. It never was. Then slowly a shift. What began as suspicion became alignment. Naomi moved with calm authority. She assigned roles, not tasks, people, not victims. Leon and Jason would consolidate files into a streamlined timeline. Raj would run logistics, communication, and printing. Amrita would speak with neighbors known for discreet pressure. Ellen would be the legal liaison. Her niece worked at a civil rights nonprofit and owed her a favor. Naomi would coordinate the complaint. Class action groundwork, federal housing violation frameworks, civil harassment. She'd seen systems implode before. She knew how to plant the charge. Quietly, precisely. And when they left past midnight, no fanfare, they didn't walk like they had arrived. Their backs were straighter, steps firmer, not safe, not yet, but certain. 3 days later, the signs began. Not protests, light. The Trenton porch light stayed on past 10, then the Singh house, then Ellen's. By the weekend, 7 houses on the same street had porch lights on every night, synchronized like code. Denise Langford noticed. So did Greg Sanford. They didn't say anything, but they began to drive slower. The next move was surgical. Jason Adler pinned a formal notice to the HOA community board just before 6 a.m. Before the sun, before Denise. Subject: motion for special emergency hearing, allegations of discriminatory enforcement practices, supporting evidence attached. At 6:22 a.m., the notice was gone. At 6:45 a.m., 3 more copies were posted. Laminated, translated, initialed. One by Naomi, one by Jason, one by Ellen. At 7:03 a.m., a copy appeared at the mailbox cluster on the east end. At 7:10, Denise stepped outside, reading glasses in hand, and froze. That night, Naomi sat on the porch with Evelyn, neither saying much. Across the street, Mrs. Singh brought out a folding chair and sat facing the open street. At 9:11, Jason walked his dog, something he hadn't done after dark for over a year. At 9:14, the teenage boy from House 47 came outside and kicked a soccer ball alone. No HOA trucks passed that hour. Richard came out at 10:01, a mug of lukewarm coffee in hand. "They're watching again," he said quietly. Naomi nodded. "Good, she replied. Then she reached behind the bench and plugged in a small extension cord. A second porch light came on, this one brighter, facing the street. The hearing wasn't held in a courtroom, it was worse. It was held in the community hall, the same beige room where Denise Langford had presided over holiday events and garden club meetings, the same room where compliance notices were laminated with cheerful fonts and HOA minutes were passed without dissent. But this time the folding chairs were packed, rows upon rows, tense faces, clenched jaws, silent phones. At the front, the HOA board sat behind a long folding table, nameplates laid out in institutional plastic. Denise was in the center, flanked by Greg Sanford and two other board members, both quiet, both uncomfortable. Naomi didn't enter until 6:59. She walked in with her back straight and her face unreadable. Behind her, Ellen, Jason, Leon, the Singhs, the Ayadells. Every chair in the second row filled by someone who had once been targeted, once been silenced. Not tonight. At exactly 7 Hasur, the chairperson called the meeting to order. Jason stood first. On behalf of a coalition of homeowners representing at least 10 separate properties, we submit an emergency motion for review of discriminatory enforcement under Articles 7.1, 7.3, and 9.2 of the Horizon Ridge HOA Charter. Denise's smile barely flickered. "That motion was received earlier this week," she said, voice rehearsed. "But we do not find sufficient cause to deviate from standard review." Jason interrupted. "We have evidence," he said calmly. Naomi stepped forward. "No more delays." She placed a small speaker on the table, pressed play. The room filled with static, then laughter. Greg Sanford's voice, sharp, recorded at poor quality but clear enough to be unmistakable. "No need to threaten them. Just keep sending letters. Sooner or later, people like that give up. They always do." The room stiffened. A man near the back sat upright. Naomi pressed a second button. "Paint shades, a violation. Garden hose width, 2. They signed the bylaws. Use them. That's what the rules are for." Denise paled. Jason handed out printed transcripts, numbered, dated. Greg started to speak, then stopped. Naomi didn't stop. She clicked to the next file, a video. Split screen. Left side, Evelyn Trenton stepping onto her lawn to retrieve a newspaper. Right side, an HOA patrol vehicle turning the corner just 10 seconds later, camera clearly trained on her. Overlaid timestamps. Another clip. Mrs. Singh receiving a violation at 5:58 a.m. A camera from across the street activated before she stepped outside. Predictive surveillance, Naomi said. They weren't reacting. They were waiting. Gasps. A board member leaned forward. "What is this footage?" "Extracted from unsecured cloud archives tied to HOA-funded installations," Jason explained. "We obtained access legally as impacted homeowners, and we've logged over 170 hours of targeted surveillance on 5 households, none of which belong to board members, donors, or staff." Leon stood now. He held a folder labeled Data Integrity, Witness Statement, L. Parker. "I was ignored when I asked questions," he said softly. "So I started documenting. You thought I was just the old man down the block. You thought I couldn't read metadata." He opened to page 4, charts, color-coded breakdowns of HOA citations. A graph showed spikes in violations aligned with HOA election dates. Another showed citation volume by household ethnicity. The board was silent. Denise's hands trembled slightly. Greg shifted in his chair. Ellen stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice. "I represent legal counsel working in partnership with a civil liberties clinic. We're not here to embarrass this board. We're here to hold it accountable. Discrimination masquerading as bureaucracy is still discrimination." Someone near the front whispered, "Amen." For nearly 2 hours, Naomi and the team presented everything. Photos of hidden cameras, HOA meeting minutes with suggestive phrasing, internal chat logs containing off-color remarks, sworn testimonies from neighbors who had moved away due to unlivable targeting. No shouting, no theatrics, just documentation. Denise tried to speak 3 times. Each time, Naomi cut her off with facts. Greg tried to cast doubt on the audio. Leon pulled out a second copy of the tape. From a different day. Greg said, "You're taking it out of context." Naomi said, "Let's play the whole thing." Greg said nothing after that. At 8:41 p.m., the board chairperson, a woman who had remained largely silent, spoke. "Given the volume and credibility of the evidence presented, this board will move to suspend enforcement authority pending external review." She looked at Denise directly. "Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties as HOA president." A gasp. Denise stood. "You can't." "I can," the chair said, "and I just did." She turned to Greg. "We'll be forwarding surveillance and enforcement records to the county for legal review. If any of these homeowners wish to file formal complaints, they will have our cooperation." Greg said nothing. He didn't blink. He looked smaller. Naomi sat down. For the first time that night, her hands stopped shaking. After the meeting, no one cheered. There were no hugs, no chants, no celebration. Just quiet footsteps out the door. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in months suddenly walking in the same direction. Doors left open a few seconds longer than usual. A quiet nod exchanged between driveways. Naomi walked home in silence. The streets looked the same hedges, same porch lights. But the air? It was different. They thought everything would go back to normal. That once Denise was dismissed and the cameras unplugged, Horizon Ridge would settle back into its old rhythm. Neat lawns, quiet porches, and smiles that didn't stretch too far. But wounds don't vanish with policy. They bruise under skin, echoing in footsteps and glances. And silence? It lingers loudest after truth has spoken. The day after the hearing, Naomi walked Primrose Way alone. She noticed things no one else would have. A flag taken down quietly from a pole where it once hung like a warning. A planter box freshly painted, not to comply, but to reclaim. House number 38 had removed the birdhouse with the hidden lens. House 42 still hadn't taken theirs down, but the red light was off. That was enough, for now. At the mailbox cluster, she ran into Mrs. Reeves, an elderly white woman who once avoided eye contact like it might cost her something. This time, Mrs. Reeves stopped, looked Naomi in the eye. "I read the packet you submitted," she said, voice dry. "I thought I understood this place. I was wrong." Naomi didn't smile. She just said, "A lot of people were." Mrs. Reeves nodded once. "Well, I'm learning." Then she walked away, slower than usual, but straighter. On Thursday, Leon Parker knocked on the door. He didn't bring folders, no audio files. Just a book of poems and a container of homemade tea blend. "Figured you needed something softer this week," he said. Naomi made space at the table. He didn't stay long, didn't say much. Before leaving, he rested a hand on her shoulder. "History's watching now," he said, and then he was gone. By the weekend, porch lights stayed on until midnight. Not because people feared the dark, but because they wanted to be seen. The Sings hosted a backyard dinner, open invite. No RSVP, no dress code, no fear. Naomi came late. She didn't stay long, but just long enough to hear laughter. That was enough. Still, healing was never linear. On Sunday, an anonymous note appeared under the Trenton's doormat. "You stirred it up. Don't act surprised if people don't forget." It wasn't signed. It wasn't brave. Naomi read it once, folded it, placed it under the teapot in the kitchen. Richard watched her. "You okay?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "That's not the voice I worry about." The voices she worried about were quieter, like the boy who used to kick his ball only when no one watched, now laughing in the street with two others. Or the young woman down on Alder Street who stopped Naomi on her walk and said, "I didn't say thank you back then. I say it now." Or Max, the family dog, who no longer growled when Greg Sanford's patrol truck passed, because it didn't. One afternoon, Naomi visited the community hall again, this time not for a hearing. The folding chairs had been pushed aside. A bake sale was in progress. Children darted around a table of plastic cups and lemonade. Jason was manning a donations box labeled, "Repairing Trust, One Step at a Time." Ellen was laughing with two elderly couples, neither of whom had spoken to her in over a year. Naomi stood at the doorway for a long time before stepping in. She bought one muffin, sat down, watched. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was real. At home, Naomi kept the USB drive. She didn't destroy it. She didn't archive it. She placed it in a small wooden box, labeled it in pen, for when memory fades. Because memory always does. But the record? That must remain. The mailbox never returned to its perfect shine. The hose remained half-coiled more days than not, and the lavender grew wilder than the HOA would have ever allowed. But no one knocked. No letters came. No one dared measure a family's worth by the angle of their blinds again. One night, Richard turned to Naomi on the porch. "You did more than win," he said. Naomi shook her head. "I didn't win. We didn't win. We endured and made sure they couldn't pretend we hadn't." He looked out at the street. The lights across the neighborhood shimmered in silent formation, porch by porch, house by house. Then he said, "You think this place will ever feel like home again?" Naomi took a long breath. "No," she said, "but it might become one." The next morning, Naomi walked to the corner of Horizon and Bluebell. There, painted in faded white on the sidewalk, was a chalk drawing, a small house with a wide-open door. Next to it, a message in a child's handwriting. "My house says hi to yours." Naomi crouched beside it, tracing the line of the roof with her finger. She didn't cry, but something inside her softened in a way war zones never had. That night, before bed, she flipped the porch switch. 2 lights blinked on, steady, warm. Across the street, others answered, one by one, like constellations in a place that had forgotten it could still carry stars. Thank you for staying until the end. Sometimes it's not the loudest stories that change us, but the ones that unfold quietly, in places no one is watching. If this story made you feel something, sadness, anger, hope, we'd love to hear it. Drop a comment below. Let your voice join the ones that refuse to be forgotten. And if it spoke to you, consider subscribing and sharing it. That's how stories like this find their way to the people who need them most. Until next time, take care and keep your light on.